the strongest hero is betrayed by humanity and reincarnates as an overpowered Dark Lord. In the year 447, there was a huge war around the world between the 6 heroes and the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord's army of skeletons rushes into the battlefield to face the heroes. But the heroes have been blessed with godly powers and now have angel forms. The Demon Lord Leonis was sitting in his room chamber watching everything from his ball. All his strongholds have been defeated and this is their last line of defense. The skeletons manage to clap some human soldiers, but one of the heroes has the power to bring them back to life. Suddenly, a huge tree-like creature appears, making the Demon Lord angry because he recognizes it as the arch-sage hero who quit being human to get more power. Leonis gets up and summons his staff to join the fight, but his Fenrir companion and loyal general stops him, reminding Leonis that he made a promise to the goddess of rebellion. She had entrusted him to do something when he was still human, so Leonis decided to accept defeat. He drops his staff and walks toward a door while his castle is being destroyed. Before entering, he promised that he would rise again in 1,000 years and reclaim his throne. And so, he sealed his own soul in the Grand Mausoleum. 1,000 years later, we then see 2 girls exploring the castle ruins of Leonis. Riselia and Regina are on a mission to scout the ruins, because they have reports that some monsters called voids are building their nests there. They walk through a corridor and reach a huge door. Riselia recognizes it as the King's Mausoleum, where Demon Lord Kings decide to rest waiting for their final days. Regina tries to open it but thinks they need to pick up something to blow it apart. Riselia then notices some writings on the door and uses her phone which language it is. She realizes the door is alive and touches it. Suddenly, the door activates and opens up. She picks up her gun and steps inside, where she finds a huge crystal. She then realizes there's a person inside and decides to help him. We then see Leonis in a barren place. He sees Riselia, the god he once made a promise to. He says that he finally has found her, and she replies that it's been over 1,000 years since they met. Leonis explains he couldn't do anything against the god powers given to the heroes, so he decided to seal his soul to keep his promise to her. She replies that she's happy that he still remembers it and walks away into the air. Leonis tries to stop her, but she simply says she hopes to meet him again. Meanwhile, Riselia is trying to shoot the crystal to rescue Leonis, who's the person inside. He complains about the noise, and wonders if it's been 1,000 years already. He guesses the reincarnation ritual was successful. Leonis then notices Riselia trying to shoot the crystal. He realizes she's human and thinks she's trying to rob his grave. So, he decides to show her the power of the reincarnated Demon Lord. He uses his magic to shatter the crystal and knock her down. He initially thinks she's a descendant of the High Elf tribe, but he's wrong. He then decides to finish her by trying to rob his grave, but he stops when she asks why a kid would be locked inside the crystal. He looks at his reflections and is shocked to see his new form. He thinks the reincarnation spell failed, but he doesn't understand why because he used a spell to rebuild his body to a previous form. He expected to be in his Demon Lord form, but he is now in his human form when he was still a hero. Yes, the Demon Lord is a former hero. The girl asks him why he was sealed inside the crystal and checks him out to make sure he's not hurt. She then suddenly hugs him, telling him that Big Sister is there to protect him. He initially gets annoyed but eventually ends up falling fainting. He later wakes up and she gives him some cookies. He thinks that his current body is bad because he fainted from something trivial like hunger, but luckily Riselia saved him. She then asks if he's fine introducing herself as a 15-year-old student from the Holy Swordsman Rearing Institute, and asks for his name. Leonis introduces himself and thinks he can use her to get information about the current world. She repeats his name sometimes and calls it cute. He gets annoyed because his name once meant chaos and terror, but now a random girl calls it cute. He then realizes that his record as the Demon Lord was deleted from history. She asks for his age, and he replies that he's 10. She then asks if he remembers the void monsters that had taken him away, but he's confused. She then explains that voids are enemies from another world, and that she and her school colleagues are knights who wield swords to fight them off. Leonis is initially confused because 1,000 years ago, the enemies of the world were people like him, Demon Lord and the Goddess of Rebellion. Riselia then explains she and Regina were investigating these ruins because they suspect it's a void base. He realizes that she found him by coincidence, but she said that the door was sealed until she touched it. He then asks her what year it is. She says they're in year 64, which confuses him. They suddenly hear a big explosion, and Riselia receives a message from Regina stating she encountered large voids. Riselia immediately holds onto Leonis, stating she will protect him. An ogre void comes through the door and Celia tries to shoot it down. He gets all annoyed they're destroying his grand mausoleum and decides to use his magic to stop it, just to trip and fall flat on his face. She tells him to back down and shoots the void, but it only tickles him. Suddenly, a laser beam destroys the void's arm and shoots its body down. It's Regina and her huge cannon. The void gets up and Regina changes her cannon form to shoot it in the chest. Despite being surprised to see Leonis, Regina simply tells Celia to take away and escape while she holds the void down. The two run away, and Leonis thinks nothing went according to his plan. His reincarnation spell failed, and he reverted to his human form before he became a demon lord. His grand mausoleum is now infested by aliens, who are destroying everything. He wants to deal with them, but he can't because the girls are there, and if he shows his power, he won't be able to use Celia to get more information about the world. Celia then says they're about to reach the surface, but a crystal suddenly collapses on the ground and turns into a wyvern void. This is nothing like the wyverns he's used to. Celia tells Leonis to run away while she deals with the monster. Her gun then turns into a sword and she prepares to deal with it. But Leonis simply ignores it and starts casting his spell to destroy the monster. Celia for some reason pushes Leonis away, telling him to run and gets sliced in the gut. She lays on the floor in a pool of her blood and Leonis wonders why she did it. She says her last words, telling him to run and escape with Regina. But Leonis gets closer to her. The wyvern gets closer and a second void appears. She apologizes for not protecting him and closes her eyes. Leonis holds her hand until her last breath but thinks she's an idiot. He only kept her to gain more information, but she decided to sacrifice herself to protect him. In fact, he could have used his power to easily block the wyvern's weak attack. He wanted more information, but he didn't think she had value to him anymore. However, she reminded him of Riselia when she protected him, revealing that when Leonis was the hero, he was betrayed by the people he tried to save. That's why he became the Demon Lord. More voids appear and try to attack him, but his magic barrier manages to block it all. He thinks it's annoying to have his human form because he regained his emotions. The voids continue to unleash attacks, all parried away. He then turns around and summons his staff. He tells the voids that he grew attached to Celia's courage and decides to punish the voids for disturbing his castle. He casts a level 8 gravity spell, smashing a void with the pressure. Another void tries to attack, but he simply blocks it with his barrier and modifies it to attack with spikes. The last void starts flying away to escape, but he simply jumps and casts another level 8 fire spell to fry it down. However, there was something he didn't expect. The void's bones remained after using the spell, something that never happened even against dragons. He thinks it's because his current mana levels are a third of what they used to. He then notices Celia is just barely alive. He normally wouldn't care about human lives because he's the Demon Lord, but he still acknowledges her because she tried to protect him. He cannot use holy spells to heal her, but he can use all spells related to death. So, he decides to use his power to give her life. He uses a spell that restores all her lost blood into her body, healing her wounds. Meanwhile, Regina manages to finish off the ogre void and tries to contact Celia, who's still unconscious. Leonis hears it and finds it impressive that humanity's technology managed to advance that much. Celia then finally wakes up and immediately hugs him, relieved he's safe. She then checks her wounds and doesn't know how she's fully healed. She's confused because she's sure she died. Leonis then explains he used his holy magic to heal her back, but she doesn't know what magic is. He then realizes Celia and Regina didn't use spells to fight the voids, but they used their weapons, which was made out of advanced magic. He realizes that in the current age, people can't use magic, so they use magic weapons that require no training or hard work. Still confused, Celia asks if he used the power of a holy sword, but he doesn't understand. She explains that some holy swords have healing powers in the Excalibur Academy. She believes he can use that power, and believes that's why he was abducted by voids. She then gives a whole explanation of what is holy swords. Basically, they're powers awakened by mankind to fight voids 60 years ago. Humanity almost lost the war against the voids, but children awakened the holy sword power to manipulate fire, wind, and others. He realizes that this power is different from the one he uses, so he decides to hide it from everyone. Regina then arrives, and the girls ask what happened to the void. Leonis lies, saying it disappeared while he was shaking in fear. They then decide to leave the ruins, and Celia asks Leonis to join her on her bike, which confuses him. He joins her and they drive back to the academy, while Regina keeps teasing Leonis. After a long drive, Leonis has finally a view of the city, and he realizes that it's the 7th Assault Garden. As they go to the city, Celia starts to recall her childhood memories from 6 years ago. She lived in the 3rd Assault Garden, But one day, they were attacked by voids. Every human stood up to fight those voids, while the rest awaited the result inside a bunker. We see that Celia and Regina, her maid, are inside the bunker. Regina was afraid of what was going on, but Celia tried to comfort her. That doesn't work, as Regina says that voids have destroyed every city they have attacked. Celia tells her to calm down because her parents are holy knights, and they will protect everyone. Celia then starts quoting her parents' and sister's words, mentioning what they will do after defeating the voids. Regina finally starts to calm down and the two girls smile. They promise they will join the Excalibur Academy and also become holy knights to protect people. However, the situation outside isn't as happy. The bunker is shaking with the explosions and Celia starts to panic. She tries to head outside and join her family in the fight, but Regina stops her. The two girls start tearing away, worried about their family. A few hours later, the bunker's door finally opens. Everyone steps outside and sees their city destroyed. Celia starts to tear down and apologizes to Regina. She told her that everything would be okay, but it all ended up being a lie. Back to the present, Regina asks Leonis if this is his first time seeing an assault garden. He replies with yes, describing it as incredible. She then explains that the city is docked there right now, but the city is usually in movement, as it's used on the front lines to attack void colonies. She explains the city can produce power and food and can also cross the ocean. Leonis is confused, not knowing how something this big can move. He decides that he must analyze the human forces before he starts his preparation to restore his Dark Lord's army. After getting into the city, Celia explains that people who can use the power of a holy sword must enroll in the Excalibur Academy. They aren't forced to fight the voids directly, but they must cooperate during the war. Leonis thinks this is an opportunity to learn more about holy swords. The girls then say they will meet him once he finishes his inspection. After they leave, Leonis steps into the bathroom and starts to freak out because his spell didn't work as intended. He was supposed to reincarnate 1,000 years into the future in his Dark Lord form, but he was reincarnated in his previous human hero form. He then calls two names, Blackas and Sherry, who appear from his shadow. Sherry is his personal maid, while Blackas is his most trusted friend, the prince of the realm of shadows. Leonis says that it's been a while since they last met, but Blackas asks him about his new form. Leonis starts petting Blackas, explaining that due to a mistake, he ended up in his original human body. Blackas mentions this is his first time seeing Leonis' hero form. Sherry then finally speaks and reveals that she finds Leonis' new form pretty adorable. He gets mad and asks if she's mocking him. The cute girl starts to panic, but Leonis lets it off, mentioning he called them because he needs a favor. He asks them to investigate the city, explaining this is a whole different future when compared to the one he imagined. He explains people don't use magic anymore, but they have some strange power. Blackas mentions that he can smell a different type of power. Leonis then says that his goal is to regain his Dark Lord army, but they first need to know everything they can. The two then return to his shadow and start their investigation. He then goes through the inspection process, where he is sprayed with something. Some machines then start analyzing his data and he continues to walk forward. He tries to pass through some sort of detector that raises an alarm, but he manages to use a spell to deactivate it. After finishing the inspection, he's given a temporary ID card. Celia appears and snatches the card from him to take a picture of it. He's a bit confused by it, but she explains that it proves his identity in the city. She then tells him it's time to visit the academy and tells him to hop on her bike. Celia takes him on a little tour around the city, showing him the huge commercial district, which shocks Leonis. He mentions that everything seems peaceful in the city, which prompts an explanation from Celia. She says the 7th Assault Garden has never been subjected to a void invasion because it's the newest city. Yet, they're currently building a new one. She also reveals that the Holy Swordsmen are deployed to the front lines to fight, but the city is secure. The city is divided into 3 parts: the residential area, the commercial districts, and the administration. In the center of the city, you will find the Excalibur Academy, which controls the military. After they arrive, Celia says he needs to first wash up before handling his registration. However, Leonis is pretty impressed with the number of huge buildings around and asks if it's part of the academy. Celia confirms and starts to explain the buildings and what they're used for. The most relevant ones are the dining halls, the training grounds, and the dance hall. Leonis is a bit confused. He doesn't understand why they have a dance hall. Celia explains that it is needed to manifest his holy sword because his heart and spirit need to be calm. She shows him the girls' dormitory, but they're stopped by Musel. Leonis notices that Celia is trying to avoid him, but the guy tries to stop them. He asks her who Leonis is, but she simply says that Musel has nothing to do with it. The guy starts mocking Celia. He laughs and says that Celia's platoon is now accepting kids because they're all failures. Celia says that Leonis is a certified holy swordsman, but the guy tells her to stop joking. Leonis, on the other hand, thinks this guy was blessed with ignorance. He knows that he might look harmless because he looks like a kid, so he decides to not punish this guy to avoid any attention. Muzel then tells Celia to stop trying to be a holy sword user and join his platoon. He claims they're the top rankers, and if she joins, she will be allowed to stay in the academy. He smirks while calling her a failure who cannot manifest a holy sword despite carrying the blood of holy swordsmen. Celia lowers her head, accepting reality, but Leonis is pretty confused that she cannot manifest a holy sword. He then remembers that she couldn't use that power in the ruins, and that's why she took the hit to protect him. He then questions what she's doing in a school for holy swordsmen. Muzel then shows his real personality. He tells her to come to his platoon and become his toy, like the other girls. This way, she will avoid going on dangerous missions. Leonis thinks the guy is using some mind control magic on the girls, but he then realizes that must be the power of Muzel's holy sword. Celia declines, making the guy mad. She then tries to continue on her way with Leonis, but the guy gives into his emotions and starts grabbing her hair. Leonis tells Muzel to stop, but the guy is simply confused. Leonis then releases a spell and Muzel's body starts shaking in fear, not knowing what's going on. He gets onto his knees in pain and Leonis gets close to him. Leonis gets close to Muzel's ear and tells him some words. He claims that Celia is his woman and that Muzel has no right to touch her. Leonis stops using his magic, giving Muzel the opportunity to activate his holy sword. However, another student arrives and says that using the holy sword's power without authorization is against the academy's rules. The situation is even worse because he's in the sector of the girls' dorm. Muzel starts walking away before wetting his pants. Leonis then thinks to himself that he cannot believe that he got worked up because of a stupid fly. But he doesn't regret it. He considers himself the most forgiving of all Dark Lords, but Celia is one of his minions. Meanwhile, Celia is all happy and thanks the girl for helping them. The girl is Elfine and mentions that seems like Muzel is eyeing Celia up. She then asks if Leonis is the boy she saved on the ruins, and Leonis notices something. Celia's friends are filled with huge plots. Elfine explains she is Celia's platoon operator, making Leonis realize that they've always been in communication. Leo introduces himself and Elfine welcomes him to the academy. She then gives him his uniform and asks Celia if they will register his holy sword. Celia says that Leonis first needs a shower and asks if Elfine is heading to the dormitory. Elfine explains she first needs to submit the void investigation data to the Knights, mentioning there's something under the ocean. Leonis gets curious about it but ignores it for now. But Elfine stops explaining the situation because Celia is starting to feel dizzy. Leonis realizes it's almost time and they head to her team's dormitory. Celia explains the assigned dorms are based on the platoon's grades. She explains each platoon has 5 or 6 members, and the academy treats them on a merit system. There are tournaments, practice matches, and examinations to decide the ranks of each platoon. She explains her team's dorm has air conditioning, new training equipment, a jet bath, and a sauna. Leonis thinks a jet bath is a weapon, but she tells him to get in. He then asks if it's okay for him to enter a girl's dorm, but she says that he's too little, so they wouldn't care. She starts making herself at home, and Leonis is confused because she has no sense of shame. She tells him to take a bath and he follows her orders. While showering, he thinks about how things changed since he was last alive. Suddenly, Celia also comes in. She has no real sense of shame, boys. She starts washing his hair and decides to tell him her plot, pun intended. She explains that her parents were deleted by Void 6 years ago. Only she survived along with Regina. She then clears Leonis' doubts, explaining that her parents were 2 holy swordsmen, so she was supposed to also use the power of the holy sword. She was accepted into the academy because of that, but she cannot awaken her holy sword. That's why she wanted to explore the ruins, because she hoped to awaken her true power when she was in danger. Leonis calls her reckless, but she explains that if she doesn't awaken her power, she will be expelled. She then starts to feel weaker and falls. Leonis realizes she has reached her limit, and touches his spell mark placed on her body. Her eyes suddenly turn crimson red and her canine teeth get bigger. She tries to reach him with her hand, and he pulls her into him. Upon getting up, she bites onto his neck and starts to feel better. She's confused as to why she had bitten him, but he decides to tell her the truth. He had to use his magic to turn her into his strongest minion, a vampire queen. She gets confused, but he explains that in reality, she is already dead.